My name is Mark Barron. I am the 35th Shepherd of the Lambs, and for those of you who don't know, the Lambs is America's oldest professional theatrical organization. In about 3 weeks, we celebrate our 148th year. This is our 14th location. We're not a restaurant on 44th Street. You figured that out. Over the years, the Lambs have been involved in the founding of Actors Fund, ASCAP, Actors Equity, Screen Actors Guild, United Artists, Paramount Pictures. Learn and Low met here and give us a piece of Brigadoon, which fuels our foundation at those events here. We've been in this building now almost 47 years. We are still one of the most affordable private clubs in New York City. After our talk this evening, you are welcome to go down to the pub for refreshments. They will gladly take your credit cards. They do not take cash.
But tip cash.
But tip cash if you'd like to tip in. But we are excited about this evening having Estelle back, because she was here a few years ago.
Yeah.
We did a great talk about women in Shakespeare, and she performed and worked with the teachers, so she's an old friend. And leading our event tonight is a Lamb who has written 116 books, I think, on film.
117.
He's a professor of film, and he's a wonderful interviewer. Please welcome Foster Hirsch.
Thank you. What an honor it is to introduce our guest of honor, who has been working steadily since about 1956. That's pretty good. She never stops, and we don't want her to. The one and only Estelle Parsons. I didn't know when we scheduled the event that November 20th is a birthday. Estelle
That's
Parsons.
my 95th.
95.
Hard to believe. You watch everything come and go. You know, I remember when things began, and now I see them end. Very strange, but wonderful.
To what do you attribute your...
You know, isn't
long-lasting.
it just amazing? I don't, you know, I know pretty much about my family back to 1633 when they came here from Leicester, England. And, I don't see that they particularly live longer than people in any other families, not that I know anything about families. So I don't know. I mean, what I think is movement and eating right and maybe living right. But I never made any effort to live right. I mean, I've had my drunken moments and my smoking moments in my life, or drinking years and smoking years. I mean, I never did intend to live so long, but I think movement's the important thing.
But also, you're active. You're always doing something.
Yeah, well,
You're always
I'm
doing
moving.
something.
Yeah.
You're working.
Yes, I
You're
am.
working, you're directing, you're teaching, you're acting.
Working all the time.
You're working all the time.
Yeah,
That's, I think, part of the answer, don't you think?
yeah.
And you like what you do.
Oh, I love what I do, sure.
Yeah. But let's start at the beginning. This is your life tonight. We're going to cover everything. Estelle knows that I do my research, so I'm going to ask her things that she's never been asked before. So that will be interesting. And you'll
That'll
know,
be good, I like that.
and you'll know the answer to everything. I have great confidence. But actually, surprisingly, you didn't start out wanting to be an actor. You even studied law.
Yeah, but I don't know, wanted to be, you know, my family is, like I said, very old New England. From Leicester, England, they came here in the 1630s. And, I think that in New England you could be like Emily Dickinson, you know, you could write. That was okay. I'm speaking about if you were a woman.
Yes.
But of course, the thing you were supposed to do was get married, and your daddy's gonna give your house next door, and you know, you're gonna stay there and get a good husband that doesn't drink too much, hopefully, you know, and have your children, and that's it. And, so when you say want to be an actress, I mean, I never wanted to particularly be anything except a human being living my life, which I've that's kind of my mantra through my whole life. I mean, when I look at my life, my professional life, I have given up jobs, which it just, I can't believe I gave up. And because I wanted to live my life. And so I went about trying to live my life, whatever was going on with me in any particular day, week, or month, you know, and just do what seemed to be the thing I wanted to do. I always in my life thought people did not like me because I always did what I wanted to do. And I think that's resented by some, this is only my inner things, you know. But I think that was sort of resented a little bit by
But at a certain
people who
point-
don't do what they want to
But
do.
Estelle, at a
Because
certain
you
point-
pay a price for it.
But at a certain point, you did study law, so you entertained the idea of entering a legal career.
No, I thought, actually, you see, I worked in a community theater from the time I was 7. So by the time I was 15, I was a fully, hi, there's my daughter Martha. I was a fully developed actress by the time I was 15, you see. So, but I didn't think it was a proper profession for a grown-up person. And my father was a lawyer, and my grandfather was a lawyer, and I got out of college. You know, I didn't want to go to college. My father said, yes, go to college. Because people would hear me, you know, I played the piano and sang in bars and things, and people say, oh, come to New York, look me up, agents and things. I'd say to my father, can I go down and do that? No, you're going to finish college, you'll be glad you did. And so I sort of gave up on that. In those days, there was, you know, there was no professional line now if you want to be an actor or who knows what else. You know, you go to college. I mean, how are you ever going to learn to act in college? I don't know, but that's what people do. And we had a woman who showed up at Connecticut College one afternoon a week, and 3 of us who were interested in the theater would have this class with her. And that was the extent of the theater department. And I thought that I would go into politics, which I was very interested in. That means, you know, you've got to be up in front of people all the time. And even when I came to New York, when I was on the Today Show, I would go out on, we went out on sound trucks, you know, and you had big crowds on the streets of New York and carry the torch around, and it was fun. And people would heckle you, but you know, politics was different, and that was in the early 50s.
But you started with law and the Today Show and being an editor and a spokesperson, and then when you went into theater, and those of us who know your career would be surprised that your first credits are in musical theater.
No, I was a singer. First I was a pianist, and then when I was 16, my teacher told my mother I should prepare for a concert career, which was out of the question. I played the piano for myself, and that was all. I didn't really want to share it. So why would I have a career doing that if I didn't want to share it? Well, some people would do what their parents wanted them to do. But I think in a way being female was good, because at that time nobody really cared what I did. They wanted me to stay home and get married and have children and stuff, but which I did, get married and have wonderful children who are now grown up, of course. But you know, it was a totally different time.
But your first Broadway credits are in musical theater.
Yes. Then I started singing, and I had an opera teacher, and of course I can't sing opera, but I did. Along the way, I met Jackie Lemmon, who was writing a lot of music and songs, ditties and things, and da 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 da. And so I learned all that stuff from him, and I would play in bars, you know, when I went, and I would go to parties. I'm not a very social person, but I would go to parties and I would just sit there and wait until somebody said, "Oh, Estelle, play the piano," and then I could get up and do my little creative activity.
So your first Broadway credit
Was musical, because
musical.
I was a
Happy-
singer then.
Happy Hunting
Yeah.
with Ethel Merman.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
that like? Ethel Merman is not your kind of actress, as it turned out.
Oh, no, she was.
She was.
Oh, gosh, I loved Ethel Merman. I tried to sing like Ethel Merman. It worked a little bit, but not forever.
What, she
But,
was a good
no, I
actress?
loved Ethel Merman, and how that happened is, I gave up the Today Show. They wanted me to go to, well, you see, I was in Marblehead, and I was visiting in New York, because somebody in Marblehead had a friend with a Cadillac, and the Cadillac broke down in Marblehead, and so they said, "Will you drive this, because they've gone back to New York, will you drive it down?" I was hanging around, I was a stand-in for Ava Gardner in some long shots in New England, I was just hanging around, you know, home. And so I came down here with that Cadillac and visited my friends who had come to New York from school. And I met Mort Warner, who was gonna start morning television. And he said, "Send me your resume." I didn't know what a resume was, so I went back to Marblehead and typed up my life story, single space. And sure enough, they hired me. And then I said, I'm gonna go to New York and take this job. And my father said, "Oh, we Parsons don't leave home." Oh. So I said, "Don't worry, it's morning television, I'll be back in 6 months, it's sure to fail." You know, nobody thought anybody would watch TV in the morning. And then I happened to be playing in London in Miss Margarita's Way when they decided to have morning television. And it was the same way everybody in London was saying, "Nobody will watch television in the morning." And I said, you'll be very surprised with what happens. Because I was very surprised. I didn't go home in 6 months. I was with NBC for 5 years, was the first woman to do political reporting for a television network. I mean, it was just crazy, wasn't it?
Then how'd you get into Happy Hunting?
How I got into Happy Hunting. So they wanted me to go to the Grace Kelly wedding, Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly. And I didn't want to go. I hated interviewing people. Oh, I just hated it so much. Hated it. And I didn't want to go. I had my twins. They were babies. I mean, a few months old or something. And because I worked right up till a month before they were born, and then they were born the weekend after I quit working, so it was all like that. So Jerry Green was running it, and I said, you know, I think I better get out of television because I have the wrong attitude here. I get the plum assignment of all of NBC, and I don't want to take it. So my husband said to me, "You're always talking about the stage. Why don't you go on the stage?" And he was a friend of Abe Burrows.
Oh.
And so he said, I said, "Okay," which I suppose I did want to do. I suppose actually that's one of the reasons I married my husband, who was a very bad bet. He'd been married 2 times before and had 3 kids. And, you know, it was not what anybody in my family at least thought I would marry. So, but I thought it was gonna lead somewhere, and that's where it led. And he said, "Why don't you go audition for Happy Hunting?" So I went there, and guess what my song was? Somebody in this room must know what song I auditioned with. But you see, I'm so old, nobody knows. Blue Skies.
Blue
Skies smiling at me.
And you got it.
Yeah, I got the part of a girl reporter who goes to the... Wasn't that funny? And Friday Burroughs' favorite line. Somebody asked me something, and I said, I can speak French, I just can't understand it. I was with that show 2 years, I think.
Did you enjoy doing musical comedy?
Oh, yeah, sure. I told you I do what I
Yes.
want to do. I never do things I don't want to do.
If you didn't, you would have been out of there.
That's right. But I was there.
Was Abe Burrows a good director?
Gee, I can't remember. It was Lindsay and Krause. And they said to me, you're going to have a great career. You know, I think that's really important when you're starting out, if people encourage you. Every little job I had, people would encourage me that it was good and I should keep doing it. Because didn't have, and I don't know that other people do, didn't have any sense of my own abilities, you know, not coming from a family where it was encouraged. When I was in all those shows when I was a little kid, my father called me in front of him and said, you know, you should not be doing all this stuff in the theater. I mean, it has caused me more anxiety all my life. I'm not blaming my father, but you know, when you're told at an impressionable age by the man you love the most in the world that you shouldn't be doing it, it's kind of hard to keep going even 95 years later.
Then, your next show, do you remember anything about Whoop Up?
Oh, Whoop Up, yeah, but before Whoop Up, you know what I was doing? Jerry Herman's first review, down at the Jim Weiler show place. A place called Nightcap, down on West 4th Street. And it was myself and Charles Nelson Riley and Rita Gardner, did fantastics, and Kenny Nelson, who had a good career in London after that. But that was Jerry Herman's first review, and that material was wonderful, really, really great. So then I went to audition for Whoop Up, because, you know, you don't make money once you get off Broadway, you don't make money. And I had these 2 kids to support, and I was having a divorce at the time, and so that was why I did Jerry Herman's thing, and so then I auditioned for Whoop Up. And that was, I bet some people know those people, Ernie Martin and Cy Feuer, I don't know, somebody must remember them. So Cy Feuer comes up on the stage, you know, he was like a cocky, kind of short man, you know, and full of energy. And I said, okay, you've got the job. And I said, well, wait a minute, because I'm in a review downtown. I have to see if they're going to let me out of that. And he just laughed at me. But I didn't know if they'd let me take a Broadway. And of course, Jerry Herman said, what? You got a Broadway opportunity? Grab it. So I did.
And then your next show, which I'm sure is never talked about, Beg, Borrow, or Steal.
Yeah. But what was good about Whoop Up was that Susan, I want to,
Yeah.
no, these are the things I've never told anybody, so I'm trying to fit them in
Okay.
here.
That's what this is about.
A woman named Susan Johnson, who is an extraordinary performer. I was doing Julius Monk's upstairs at the downstairs. I did 2 of his shows. And Susan was either doing an act in the building that was downstairs, the upstairs, and upstairs, the downstairs. And she was playing the lead in Whoop Up. And she was notorious for missing performances. So anyway, I was hired to stand by for her. And sure enough, we're in Philadelphia, and Ernie Martin came to wherever we were having lunch, and he said, you're on today. Susan's sick. And this was for a matinee out of town before he came to New York. So I had no rehearsals. I'd watched all of the performances, been there every day, but never had a rehearsal on the stage at all for the thing. So, and now I was going to play the leading role in this musical. So, I had to go get my hair dyed red, and then I'm sitting there thinking I've never had a rehearsal in this show, and Cy Fewer comes up and says, I want you to make a few changes in the script here. I don't think so, but I don't remember whether I actually entertained that or not. Paul Ford was in, remember
Oh,
Paul
yeah,
Ford?
Ford, you built
He
that.
was great. He was in that show. And so I went on in that show, letter perfect, just because I watched the rehearsals from the very beginning and was, you know, prepared to go on. But I had had not one single rehearsal on the stage. Wasn't that amazing? It's just, well, it's amazing to see the, oh gosh. No, I don't take credit for it because, you know, we have such riches inside ourselves when they're called out. I've always been amazed at the things that came out of me that I didn't know were, you know, who am I? I'm still a little girl from Marblehead, you know. But it's amazing how full of wonderful things we are that when the time comes, they come out. I mean, in showbiz, I can't speak about other professions, which may be a little different.
The reason I ask about beg, borrow, or steal
Yeah.
is your co-star, who I want to hear about him, Larry Parks, who had been blacklisted, but then he and Betty Garrett got
Betty
roles on
Garrett.
Broadway in this show because there was no blacklist on Broadway, really.
It was their show, really, and who was the third guy? You know, comic,
Larry Blythe.
huh?
Larry Blythe?
No,
No, it's the role of Estelle.
no. Eddie Bracken?
Yeah.
Eddie Bracken, yeah.
I think so. But anyway, they brought it from California, you know. It was about, I think my part was somebody who worked in a health food store. And in those days, I mean, nobody ever heard of such a thing or cared about such a thing. It was strictly a California thing. What a terrible flop that was.
But
And I was standing there in the matinee singing my song, and I was thinking, what am I doing here? What am I doing here, singing this material which is, you know, hardly worth singing? What am I doing here? So I then immediately set out to find some better material to do, that I could stand up there and be happy, and, like Jerry Herman could stand up there and be happy that I was doing it, you know?
But how did you get from musical theater to the Actors Studio in Lee Strasberg?
Oh, well, honestly, that's very weird, isn't it? When I was on the Today Show, I heard about, there was a big piece in the paper, I think, this can't be true, but, and I got another person who had come from California to also be a writer-editor for the Today Show. And I said, I want to do an audition for the Actors Studio, could you come and help me? So I played Emily in our town, and I took her along and she read the other part. I mean, I didn't even know what auditions were, obviously. I mean, anyway, so I went and did it for Kazan and Cheryl Crawford. And, so he said, you know, Lee Strasberg has private classes, and I think you ought to go see him. So I did.
You didn't pass your first audition.
What? With Kazan?
Yeah.
Well, how could I? I mean, I wasn't even working with an actor. I didn't seem to know anything about anything at that point.
So you
Weird.
had private classes with Lee.
Yeah, so I went to see Lee, and I sat in a chair in his hall, and he came out and said, why do you want to be here? And I started crying, and I cried for about 3 minutes. So you see, when you say, did I want to be an actress, obviously I knew that my destiny was to perform, but I couldn't cope with it. As a New Englander, I couldn't cope with it anywhere at all along the way, and I still have much too high level of anxiety when I work.
But did Lee help you a lot?
Maybe the pandemic helped with that. See, I'm finally better.
Did Lee help you? How did he help you? Obviously he
No,
helped
you know, I was already an actress, you know, I'd been doing these parts in this community theater. It's the same thing, you have an audience, you hear them laugh, or you hear the pocketbooks open on the matinee when they're gonna cry, you know you're doing your job, right? That's your job, to make them laugh and cry. So I knew all that. I knew all that by the time I was 15, you see, so. I didn't have anything to learn. And originally, Lee Strasberg's method was for professional actors. It was not a tool to learn about. If you were a student, it wasn't acting. It wasn't for you. It was for people who were working in the theater professionally, advanced training, like you have a job and it has emotional requirements, and you can't fulfill them 8 times a week, and you think, how am I gonna do this? And then if you know, look at Stanislavski and Strasberg, you find ways there of how you sustain a really high emotional performance for all that time, but it was never for, so to say, non-professional people to learn about acting. No, 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 no. First you've got to learn, you've got to go out on the stage, you know, you've got to learn what the parts of the stage are and how you get out there, and to speak loud and be sure to go out at the right time. I mean, you'd be amazed the people I work with sometimes now, and they're out in the stairwell on their cell phones, and it's time for them to be up. Come on, you're on. I mean, you wouldn't believe what passes for professional acting in the theater these days. Not everybody, but
But whatever you got from
times.
Lee, whatever you got from Lee,
I didn't get anything from Lee.
you
I
must
had it all
have.
myself.
But whatever the exchange between you and him must have counted for something, because you've been an active member of the Actors Studio for decades. You
Yeah.
believe in the work of the studio.
Well, yeah, but you see, everybody was there then. Every single, in the 60s, every playwright in New York was there. And the directors were there. Jerry Robbins, Irene Forness, Arthur Miller. I mean, they were all there at the Actors Studio, because Gadge and Bobby Lewis were the hottest directors in New York, working constantly with the best people and the best material. And so everybody wanted to be there. It's that kind of thing, you know. People want to be with that. And I got all my jobs out of there, because I would work there, and all these directors. This is just before television became so big. And they would see my work and they would hire me. Tim Stanley didn't want to do whatever that play was. He finally did, so they called me in 1,000,000 times, and stuff like that. So you were part of a theater community. And that studio was started by Bobby Lewis and Kazan, because they had been at the very tail end of the group theater, which was in the 30s for 10 years. And they realized the importance of a community, because it's a very lonely life. I mean, all you gotta do is move to California and be an actress if you wanna know what a lonely life it is. But here was a community of actors all doing the same stuff. So I've never really felt out of work in my life, because even now, because the minute I didn't have a paid job, I was over there working on certain acting things that I wanted to work on, like when I was 40, could I play somebody 25? But the first play I did, Mrs. Daly Has a Lover, after doing all those musicals and Threepenny for such a long time, and on tour with Lenya and everything. But then I got this job. I'm a tragicomedian. You might not know that, but that's what I am. And there aren't very many of them. So if someone starts a play with an actress who is not a tragicomedian, they're going to have to get rid of them in rehearsals and find a tragicomedian. That would be me. And so I got this play, Mrs. Daly Has a Lover, because they needed somebody like that. and that was me, so that was how I started working as an actress then, and I was 32, and the woman in the play was 39, and my biggest problem was, how am I going to play a 39-year-old woman when I'm only 32?
But I want to go back to the studio,
Oh,
which you
dear.
stayed committed to.
Why do you want to go back to the studio? You know all about the studio.
But I know about it, but not everybody here does. But you have stayed loyal to it all these years.
Well, it's a community. What are you gonna do, walk away from your community?
But that's an important element, isn't it? The bonding. Actors have a place to go.
I think so. You know, my husband talked like you all the time. What are you doing down there? Because I'd come home and complain how dysfunctional it was. And I said, what are you doing down there? And I waited 1 year, I gave up all my jobs and waited for Arthur Penn to come back because he had a new rehearsal technique that I was just, it was so meaningful to my professional life. So meaningful. No, to my personal life, because I always felt I was in the wrong business, trying to be truthful in what was not hardly ever a truthful situation. It was just so awful. But then I worked with Arthur in these experimental rehearsal techniques, and the whole world just opened up for me. It was like all the black keys and right keys are in, white keys are in the right places. And so I waited a whole year to work with him in the cherry orchard at the studio for no money, no money changes hands there. So. But it's extremely meaningful to me because of that, and now I help. I work there now to, I'm directing a marvelous play about racism by a young woman. She's 30, but it's her first full-length play, and I teach there. I talk about these things, experimental rehearsal techniques and stuff like that.
When you branched out in theater, you were very interested in Brecht. You did a lot of Brecht.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of Brecht.
Yeah.
I saw you in the notorious Mahagoni. Did anybody see that? It had about 8 years of previews and it opened and closed in a weekend, something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that Carmen Capalbo was sort of misjudged for that. I thought it was a valid and interesting approach to Brecht, and I saw it develop over the course of many months.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of problems with it, and his career never recovered.
He had a nervous breakdown in the middle of rehearsals. We rehearsed without him, and we rehearsed 4 months, and then I think we played 4 days.
You had previews for 4 months.
Yeah.
But you and Barbara Harris stayed with the
Mhm.
show throughout the previews, and it was the American premiere of Mahagoni, so historically it was important.
It was, but I gave up. Terribly big Hollywood movie to stay with that show. Barbara Streisand came to my dressing room and said, "What are you doing here?" Because I stayed with it, so it's nice to hear you say it's good I stayed with it, basically.
Well, basically, it was a historically important show. What is it about Brecht that attracted you?
I think because since I was going to be a politician in that little period before I got to New York and had this journey, I was always interested in social, and the reason I went to law school, I was interested in constitutional law and interested in social justice, which I still am interested in politics, interested in social justice, and, and Swedish, and they have a very good way of life there, or they did. Now they're so full of immigrants, they don't know what to do with themselves, like some of the rest of us have been through all that so much, but they hadn't been through it so much. But I just believe in social justice. And Brecht did.
Brecht did. Is the alienation technique that he talked about antithetical to the method, or do you just apply good acting to do Brecht without doing something different?
it's interesting because the piece I'm doing about racism now is I happen to be very good at this. I think people at the studio are amazed at how good I am. It's presentational, you know, you have a cast of people and they get up and they have a message that they believe in, that they want to sell to the audience in a dramatic way. That's what Brecht was about. I don't know if that's too simplistic to express what I really mean, but it's trying to get people to be better human beings, to behave better, to be decent and kind and all those things. It's not just, Neil Simon.
But it's not psychological realism.
What would that be? Psychological
So, I
realism.
mean,
You mean naturalism?
Naturalism.
Naturalism. I don't think there's any place for that,
You know,
not particularly. I mean, yeah, sure, would you call that Tennessee Williams?
not, you use the method for Tennessee Williams, but he's a lyrical playwright.
Yeah.
He's lyrical.
He is a strange combination of, that's why I love British people, because it's a strange combination of lyrical and, I don't know if you can call it naturalism, but this strange, it took me 2 years, I did a play of his, and 2 years later on the sidewalk, I thought, I know what that is now. I couldn't figure out, but that's what it is. And that's why I love the Brits, because it's, you have to have that lyrical, bigger sense of things, but you also have to have the really deep, real involvement with your heart and soul.
Is it simplistic to say that it's the latter that the method is designed to do? The deepness,
You know,
the depth
I'm
of heart
not
and
a
soul?
method actor, and I'm not really an expert on what the method is designed to do. I think it's designed to make you act well, isn't it?
To help the actor when there's a problem,
Yeah,
to get through the problem.
yeah.
The first time I saw you on stage was in a show called The East Wind
Oh, my,
at Lincoln Center. And I was new to New York, and I was writing reviews for the Columbia Spectator up at Columbia.
you were at Columbia.
I was at Columbia, and I don't remember anything about the play. I don't remember anything about the experience, but I remember in my review, I said, there's a performance of genius by Estelle Parsons.
Oh, come
I
on.
did.
Come on, are you serious?
I did. That was my first acquaintance with you. I didn't know who you were. I said there's a performance of genius by an actress named Estelle Parsons. Do you
Why?
remember that show at all?
Gosh. I was thinking about it the other day, because I don't. I think George Voskovic was in it. And it was written by this very strange guy who came from England, who was German, right? And this George Voskovic ran this store, right? And I worked in that store, and that's all I remember. But isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
You recognized whatever I can bring
Whatever
to the
you
table.
did, I
you
saw it in that,
recognized.
on the stage in that
Isn't
play, and I
that
remembered
interesting?
that line in my review. But I also loved Seven Descents of Myrtle. Was that the play you're thinking about, where you figured out what was going on?
Yeah, yeah.
Tennessee Williams, did anybody see Estelle on Broadway originating Seven
They're
Descents of
too
Myrtle?
young, they're too young.
They're too young.
He says.
And I won the Academy Award then, remember, because I then said, thank you to David Merrick for letting me come here for my performance of Seven Descents of Myrtle.
I remember that.
Yeah,
They let me out for 2 nights or something to
yeah,
get the Oscar.
one night.
One night.
They sent me out, I said, I'm not going out there, I don't care about Hollywood, I don't care about all that stuff. And David Merrick, right, he said, you're going, here are the tickets, I'm putting your standby on whether you like it or not, get out of here.
But speaking of performances of genius, you've all seen Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh.
I mean, amazing performance to this day. You know, I teach film history, Estelle, and we divide film history into 2 parts now. It used to be that Citizen Kane was the dividing line,
Mhm.
but now we've moved it up to 1967, and Bonnie and Clyde is the dividing line. So part one of our history course is film history up to Bonnie and Clyde, and then part two is Bonnie and Clyde and following. It's really a historically important film in ways you couldn't have imagined when you were making it.
Yeah. It just hit, well, it was the end of the rule of law, and I was horrified. In that scene where Faye spit in the face of Denver Pyle, the Texas Ranger. I thought, what am I in? I went to law school, I understand the rule of law, constitutionalism, what am I doing here? This movie is saying spit in the eye of the authorities. I was horrified, and I went around giving all of these interviews about how horrified I was by my job.
Do you have a different thought about the film now, or are you still horrified?
No, I'm horrified and deeply unhappy that it caught on in the whole world, and it was the beginning of where you might hope we're seeing the end of this cycle, where spit in the eye, I mean, Trump is a perfect example, I guess, not to particularly name him, but spit in the eye of the authority and do what you want to do. And that was the 60s, you know, whatever the 60s was. And that movie, you can't hope a movie will have the kind of notoriety. I mean, you can't, if you make a movie, you can't possibly make a movie that will do what that movie did, because it just hit the button of the globe.
At that time.
Yes,
And in
that's
fact,
what I mean.
do you remember that Bosley Crowther, who'd been a
Oh,
long-time reviewer of the New York Times,
Yeah.
didn't like Bonnie and Clyde? And the film hit so big that he was considered old hat by then.
Yeah,
and
he
he was
lost his
forced to
job.
resign.
Yeah.
He lost his job because he gave Bonnie and Clyde a negative review. That, in other words, he wasn't with it. He wasn't with it because Bonnie and Clyde was a sort of defining moment.
Oh, yeah,
It was a defining moment.
yeah.
But your character is amazing. She's not a criminal. She's horrified, isn't she, by what's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. Very horrified. Yeah, she was alive too when we started filming that. She was blind, and she was doing church work in Dallas.
And you met her?
I wanted very much to meet her. I had done 4 months of research in the New York Library, and then the libraries down there, microfilm and everything about the 30s and Bonnie and Clyde. I knew more about them. It's the first and only time I've done research like that, but I had all this time hanging around waiting to make that movie because another theater job, which was going to take me away, so I couldn't make the movie. And then I said to Arthur, well, you know, I can do it because this theater has gone belly up, so I have 2 kids and I'm without a job. So he said, well, that's good for us. So that's why I did that movie. I also loved to work for him. I would go anywhere to work for him. I wonder if I still would, I don't know. Probably. Probably. Yeah, it made my work really meaningful.
What was it about his approach that reached you?
Well, the interesting thing about him was that he thought actors should do their own work. You know, you get so used in the American theater, and I think it might even be true now, you get so used to doing what directors want you to do, and you get so used to saying, oh, well, what do you think I should do here? And if you said that to Arthur, he said, well, what do you think you should do there? He thought the actor really needed to step up and bring what he or she had inside, not be manipulated by outside forces. That would mean directors, most of whom used to be in it, I don't know what they're like now, but used to be in it for the power. And you know, Vivica Lindfors had a class down at SVA for directors, teaching them a little bit about acting, and she was away once. take my class from me, so I went down there and they were all like, it was more about, I'm gonna be a power figure, than about accomplishing anything creative. You know, they all had their baseball caps and all walked like this, and they were all men, you know, it was. But Arthur was unique. He had studied, I think, on the GI Bill psychology, and I think that had a lot to do with his approach to actors, but he really could always get the best out of them. I pursued him because I saw The Miracle Worker, and I thought I really want to work for that man. You see, I never did really care what was going on in my life in terms of success, you know, commercial success as a performer. But, and so I knew people who were working with him, and I managed to get an appointment to see him for the Berkshire Drama Festival, which was where he started all this experimental rehearsal technique that I'm so interested in. I think my interest in life is the art of acting is really the thing that interests me the most in life. But you know, when I was in boarding school, I had these tests, and they told you what you were supposed to be when you grew up, you know, and so they told the headmistress that I should be a surgeon because I had such good tweezer dexterity. Sounds like a comedy routine, but it wasn't. So she went and talked to them, and then they came back and said, well, maybe I could be in a creative field as well as my tweezer dexterity.
But speaking of directing, Estelle, you've become a director. You've directed quite a bit.
I have
at the
actually.
studio, and you've directed the Shakespeare for Kids on Broadway.
Yes.
Like Joseph Papp.
Yes, yes, and Christine Wepner is here, who did the first directing job I did, Antony and Cleopatra, at the Women's Interart, which in the Shakespeare Quarterly they said was, you remember what they said, Martha?
Yeah, the guy said he was really a Shakespeare scholar, and he said he had never seen it actualized and come to life with such truth and specificity of what Shakespeare meant. I mean, the way he wrote about it,
It was amazing.
the fact that nobody has read that it was really so powerful. We read it about
97.
6 months ago, and
Yeah,
we were
just
like,
happened to see
whoa.
it in our bookcase, you know, read it. At the time, I didn't really realize what all that meant.
What are your strengths as a director?
You know, I think that my strength is that I'm interested in what's going on in front of me, and I'm interested in making that interesting to an audience. I don't know how to say what I'm interested in, except I want to see people be truthful up there, you know? And I want them to express themselves as best they can. I don't know. I don't know really what I do. I couldn't really. I haven't thought about it. I haven't directed enough to think about it, you know? I want things to be on their feet, and I want people to be alive up there, you know? I don't know. It's
But
weird.
You bring your own instincts as an actor to your directing, surely.
I don't know, you know, Paul Newman and I were talking about that a lot, because I was in Rachel, which was when he started directing, and the difference between acting and directing. But I couldn't really tell you. I know I have to have a room of people who are simpatico, because the first thing I tried to direct was a poetic piece from some woman out of Berkeley, and there was one woman in it who was very not simpatico with the rest of the people. And this maybe doesn't have much to do with acting or not, but I thought, we can't really go on with you know, a bad apple in this barrel. We just can't really move forward unless this whole group, you know, with a bad apple, I just couldn't do it. So I think that's the beginning, and then if you put a bunch of creative people together and sort of encourage them to bring themselves, they do, and then it's done.
And then you edit what they give you?
Well, no, they usually do it themselves. I mean, I think actors are kind of maligned, you know, because I think that they're creative, and I think it's interpretive, yes, but also terribly creative, and I think if they have the opportunity, they will bring incredible things. And what I thought was that what the performer has to offer has to be the first thing you deal with. That's why you don't go with the words, which are the frosting on the cake or the fringe on the shawl. That you get people to understand what's in themselves and try to get out, get them to express what their unconscious is giving them in terms of the character they're working on. Because once you read a play and you sort of agree to a character, that's working in you. You know, it's not a thing here. It's working in whatever your acting instrument is, you know.
But you're talking about instinct and the use and the unconscious in a way.
I guess so.
In a way.
Yeah, yeah. And the best thing is to go out on the stage and be open to whatever wants to happen. You know, when you have a place like the studio where you can do that, I mean, obviously you have a job, you have other things to bring to it. But if you can just be aware of yourself rather than trying to control yourself or manipulate it. I don't believe in all that manipulating yourself,
Now, you've taught,
which most actors, I think, do believe in.
you've taught acting at Columbia and Yale and different places. Can acting be taught?
I mean, you either have it or you don't. But I think the purpose of Strasberg was, and maybe Stanislavski, but I'm not a scholar of those things at all, but I think the purpose was to give, I mean, everybody isn't great. Everybody doesn't have a great talent. And I think that what they tried to do was give people who didn't have a great talent an opportunity to use themselves, and that it's that kind of truth that reaches an audience in a certain place, the people in the audience. You know, and these Swedish researchers, I'm sure you know all about that, who have done these tests that the audience's hearts beat all in the same rhythm when they have a theatrical experience. Have you read about all that stuff?
No, I have not.
You haven't?
No.
Well, those of us in showbiz have. But you're in one foot in showbiz and one foot in academia, right? Yeah. And yeah, it's very interesting research that someone told me the other day is still going on there, which I heard about maybe just pre-pandemic.
Okay, now we can't be talking to Estelle Parsons without mentioning Roseanne and Beverly Harris, the character you played over
Oh,
and
yeah, that's
over
my
and over and
character.
over again. Are you sick of her? Do you like her? Do you discover new things to keep you interested in her over a long period of time? And many
Yeah, we
episodes?
had 10 years in the 90s with Rosie, and now we have the Connors. It's on tonight, actually. They gave me dementia. Boy, that is hard to act, I'll tell you that, when you're 95 particularly, really hard to act. But I guess it was good, very good scripts, very good scripts. I don't, you know, I don't have an interest in those mechanical media. I love to work in the theater. But one has to do them, or one wants to, one has to do them if one has a career in acting in this country. One has to do those things.
But the scripts were good enough to keep you interested over a
Yeah,
long
they have
period of
wonderful
time.
writers, really wonderful writers. And I didn't do an awful lot of them, you know, maybe 2 or 3 a year, something like that. Yeah.
What was it like being Shelley Winter's daughter?
Oh, she was so mad. Dye your hair, you shouldn't have gray hair, you're only 3 years younger than me, how can I play your mother? So funny.
That was an issue for her.
I had a very strong friendship with Shelley, yeah. I lived with her for a while when I came out to do, went out to do the Norman Conquest there. She was a great woman, and really a great artist, I think, yeah. Great. And she would just walk, you know, if she had to appear at a luncheon or something like this, she would just walk in and be so ebullient and so, just all there. She was just born with a lot of wonderful qualities, human qualities.
Which she shared,
Yeah,
which she was very generous about.
yeah,
And you could feel it in her work.
yeah.
You could feel it. When you're in a show and it's going to flop, do you know it? Because you've been in some dillies.
I was in everybody's flop, like I was in Fewer and Martin, Whoop Up was their first flop. Every show they had was a big hit until they did Whoop.
You were in a show by
And I was-
Murray Shiskel called Way of Life. Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah.
It didn't even open on Broadway. It previewed and it closed before it opened. Did you know you were in a disaster?
I don't know. I kind of forget. In musicals, you know. In musicals, you know when the music's no good. But I don't know, with plays, I don't know thinking about that so much, but I was in Edward Albee's flop too. Malcolm.
Which I liked.
Malcolm?
I liked it.
Yeah. I was in that.
I thought it was terrific, absolutely terrific. I want to end, we'll open it for questions, but I want to end with this interesting bit of information, which Estelle may or may not know. But she is in the Guinness Book of World Records. She set a record.
Me?
You appeared on Broadway more times in your 80s than any other performer in theater history.
Really? Wow.
4 shows. August, Osage County, Good People, Nice Work If You Can Get It, and a show with a terrible title, well, you were good in it, The Velocity of Autumn. And that's gonna attract a lot of tickets, The Velocity of Autumn. 4 times in her 80s on Broadway, a record.
Wow. Good.
And won't you be on Broadway again in your 90s, I'm sure?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't. I don't think so. I
do.
don't know. I don't know that I would have, you know, I'm 95 this week and probably that's affecting my thinking. But I don't know that I have the stamina really for 8 shows a week. It's awfully hard work. You know, maybe if I have a walk-on and 1 line or 1 word or something like that. And I don't know, I think my memory is probably still very good, but
I would
I
say
always
so.
I thought that when I got to, this is funny to me, but I thought when I got to be 40, I would start to direct and stop acting. It's funny, but I don't know. I don't think I would take a Broadway show. I don't know. Don't ask me, please don't ask me.
Any questions?
Do you have a quick thing, maybe about Melvin Van Peebles? You were in Watermelon Man? Is there
Watermelon Man.
something you could tell us about it? Because it's such an unusual, combination of the script and the director, creating something different. Can you share
Melvin
anything
Van
about that?
Peebles had been in France and he'd done a movie, The 5-Day Pass, you know that movie?
No.
Yes.
Very good movie, right? And, so, he wanted to do this movie, in Hollywood. He was gonna be the first black director in Hollywood. And my, lawyer and manager and all those people said, don't do it, don't get near it. He wanted me to do it, and, it was about a white man who turned black.
Dr. Cambridge, right?
Yeah, right, poor thing. He died not too long after that, too, yeah. And, so, it was really, terrible, the way he was treated by Hollywood, and all my people said, don't do it. I said, look, I've seen his work, and if he wants me to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm interested to work with him. And, these suits, we call them, the Hollywood suits. Don't get near those Hollywood suits, right? Gosh, they are the worst of the worst in the whole world, right? So, they would be hanging around, and he got that movie made in 4 weeks. And it got so bad that, when we did that scene in the bathtub where he's got milk, he's trying to turn white, Melvin was right there, and we didn't even know when we went to work what we were gonna shoot, so we couldn't be prepared. I mean, we had all the script, but we, usually say, these 7 pages, learn them, and then they're ready to do it. But, we would go, and the script girl would tell us the line. He would say, you stand there, you do this. And she would tell us the line, and we would say the line. And that was the way we worked. I mean, and the suits were standing right there waiting for this poor little black man to, do his thing. We were talking about that movie today. I don't think I've ever seen it, really, but I think maybe I'll make an effort if I could get my TV to work.
It's not remembered or shown much.
It used to be shown a lot,
It used to
yeah.
be shown, but it's not so well remembered anymore.
Yeah, no, I
But
remember
worth
seeing it as a
seeing.
kid, and
Yeah.
it was on a late night TV. It was kind
What-
of, I think
what-
I had a cult following for a time.
It did for a time, but I think it's sort of,
I haven't seen it recently, I will say that, yeah.
what was it like working with Woody Allen?
Oh, I didn't really work with
You did,
him.
you were just in Don't Drink the Water.
No, he had nothing to do with it. Oh, that was
Oh, the movie.
a terrible
Oh,
thing,
Jack Gleason, right? Jack Gleason.
He didn't direct it. What's the name of that guy? He was a second
Howard
banana.
Morris.
Howard Morris?
Yes. He really didn't know how to direct a comic film.
He was Ernest T. Bass.
Huh?
On Andy Griffith, Howard Morris was Ernest
Oh,
T. Bass.
Show
on
of
Andy
Shows,
Griffith.
Yeah,
He was on
he
Show of
was
Shows.
terrific, but he
Yeah.
didn't really know how to direct a comic movie. It was Jackie Gleason and myself, who was a friend, anyway. Yeah,
You like working with Gleason?
yes, well, we were great friends, and yes. I love working. I worked with Zero Mostel, I worked with Gleason, I worked with Roseanne. I love working with those comics. They're really unique, but they're so wonderfully gifted that it's a pleasure for me to be in a company of really gifted people like that. It's like it was a pleasure to me to be in Lee Strasberg's company, because he's the only genius I think I've ever known that I had such a long, professional, so to say, relationship with. And it's nice to think about that. He just lectured, You didn't really learn from him in that sense, but you just listened to him lecture. And the most meaningful story for a lot of young actors, I think, might be, he told a story about this German star who was, his work was, so one night he'd be brilliant off the charts, and the next night he'd be terrible. So someone said, oh, they went to see George, whatever his name was. That people would say, well, was it a good night or a bad night? And when you're young and you really can't trust your instrument to give, full power 8 times a week, a story like that is very helpful, that somebody actually got jobs and got ahead and became successful when his work was so up and down. But he just lectured all the time, and it was just wonderful to be in the company of his lectures, and then you did with it whatever you wanted, and you heard what his response to the actors in front of him would be. And you would learn from watching them and then hearing him talk about them. It was that kind of relationship. Lois Smith expresses that very well, how she learned everything she knew from, being there at the studio with him, just listening to him lecture about what was going on in front of him.
And you absorbed it, and you might not have known at the
Yeah,
time what you
yeah.
were absorbing.
That's right,
But over
that's right.
time, it meant something.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Alan, did you have a question?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about Gleason also, just because he was so notoriously resentful of having to rehearse, and you're a theater person. So I wondered, was that a difficulty? But I'll.
No, not in movies. I mean, you just don't rehearse in movies. I mean, you do sometimes, both, I've had it both ways, but they're a completely different medium, It's not the actor's medium that, and I learned that in an interesting way. They had when I was, well, this is a long time ago, but they had at the MoMA, they had a tribute to Marlene Dietrich, and someone invited me to it, so I went. And they had these clips of her movies, one from Germany and then in Hollywood. And in the Hollywood thing, she looked like just another Hollywood star. But in those German movies, you just saw this brilliance that gave her this worldwide, reputation that he had. And so I learned that too with Bonnie and Clyde, because we had Dee Dee Allen cut it. And it depends, on how many frames you get, how good your performance is gonna be. I mean, that doesn't appeal to me. I wanna be in charge of it on the stage, But in movies, it really does depend on how the movie is put together and how the movie is shot, so. And that was a great lesson to me, to see the difference in Marlene Dietrich's ability to do things. It was amazing. They probably still have it there. They should show it again.
Foster, may I ask somebody else something? Would you talk a little about the difference between acting drama and acting comedy?
Acting what?
Acting drama and acting comedy, would you talk a little about the difference in what the experience is like, what the approach is?
Oh, gosh. I think it's just in the nature of the material, and I think it's timing, isn't it? And it's true in both things. An interesting example is what's on tonight with my character having dementia and Laurie Metcalf coming in and discovered that her mother has dementia. And it was very successful, what we shot, which was wonderful, because it was a wonderful script and a very good director who knew enough to leave Laurie alone, who had, this realization that her mother really didn't know who she was. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But it's just a matter of timing. It's a matter of the pauses, really. And I don't know. I don't think very, think much up here. I just
But you
do.
mentioned
I just
the
do.
difference, Estelle, between theater and film. And in film, you're not fully in charge. But have any of you see a performance in which this woman was totally in charge the entire evening, Miss Margarita's Way?
Oh, yeah, that was great. That was really
That
great.
was you. Nobody could tell you what to do.
No.
You could design that show
No.
any night, every night, any way you wanted to.
Right,
And I
yeah.
suspect it changed a great deal from one time.
Well, I
to the
had a
next.
script, and the fact was that if you just followed that script, it was so abstract that it would be better than anything you thought up on your own. So I stopped thinking things up on my own in the middle of my tour, I think, but I always tried to adhere to the script because it was always better than anything I thought. It was a very extraordinary piece of material, and I just loved that. That's probably the high point of my life, because I loved mixing it up with audiences like that, you know, really getting your hands on them. And it came to me that very way. Some guy from France was doing an interview with me, and I was saying I'm so disgusted with the theater because, you know, after television came in, and George Rose and other people that I worked with, actors, you know, audiences stopped responding fully, and you really want that audience energy coming at you. But it got so, after TV got so popular, it got so that people would come and sit and watch like this and not really be a part of the work. So we were all getting really disgusted with, I was in that Pirates of Penzance, a musical
Oh,
with
yeah,
George, and we were talking about it all the time, about how terrible the audiences were. Not to mention how they smelled of martinis on matinee days. But, I forgot what we were.
Well, you got a response from the audience of Miss Margarita. You forced a response
Yeah,
from us.
yeah. So he said, you might like to play this play, and he sent it to me in French, and I read just enough French to realize that I was very interested. And Joe Papp was very kind to, you know, do it for me. So that was a great, great experience. And one day on tour, I went out and there were 32 people up on the stage after the intermission. They'd been writing on the blackboard. It was a play about totalitarianism, and he keeps wanting me to do it, you know, but I got afraid once Trump came in. I knew it would have been wonderful, but I was afraid to do it. And we stopped on Broadway because one night a tomato came and smashed onto the set. And Joe said, we can't go on like this. It was a show you should do with 2 or 3 performances and then leave town before they really got to you. Because it was, the metaphor was an 8th grade school teacher, where people are, as Freud said, ineducable when they get into the 7th and 8th grade. So, and sure enough, they were. And he said, they'll become your students as soon as you say that they're your 8th grade students, they'll become it. And they did. Another way audiences behave, you see, they did. And people would raise their hands, and they wouldn't even know they'd raised their hands. They'd be humiliated then if I called on them.
But you were scary.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. You were a terrifying
That's scary,
teacher.
yeah.
Terrifying teacher.
And then, in the end, she has a heart attack, you know, and falls on the desk. And when I played at Berkeley, and nobody is supposed to save her at that point. There's a boy that comes up on the stage through the play, so, but anyway, so in Berkeley, I did my fall on the desk with my heart attack, and I'm lying there. And I feel this person sort of coming and manipulating my body. And it was some Berkeley student who'd read the play and decided he'd take part in it that way. It was really crazy.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. Hey, Marilyn, come on, what could you ask me for heaven's sake?
It's something I wanted to add.
Yeah,
You were praising Arthur Penn.
Yeah.
you know. And one of the greatest directions, if not the greatest direction I ever had, was from him. In a session at the Actors Studio, I was working on a play by Elaine May, and she is portraying a lay prostitute. No pun intended. Okay. And she's suicidal, you know, and calls a suicide hotline. And the next time I saw Arthur, he said to me that he'd been thinking about it, and he said, how do you want to look when they find you? How that mind worked, that he came up with that, you know. He took my emotions off my emotion and put my attention into something so practical, which freed my emotions. And it was really magical. Is that what you're talking about his direction?
I don't know what I'm talking about, but I guess it's a good example of it. Yeah, yeah.
Just really, I wish that I would be able to, when I started directing a little bit, come up with something so in the back door,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
to free the actor,
yeah.
you know.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
You have to have an imagination, you know.
I think it's a good place to stop. This is Marilyn Sokol, I think you all know. But actually, haven't we had an extraordinary lesson tonight? We've been Miss Margarita's students and we've learned a lot.
Happy birthday, dear Estelle. Happy birthday